Hello, this is the Wikstrand, and today we are going to talk about sexy dudes. Yes, ladies and dudes who like dudes. This list will be a celebration to the awesome men who has graced our silver screens for the past decades. Hollywood has always been a look-based place, and your ability to be sexy and be great and be hunky and be awesome drives up box offices, but because basically women are gonna come to see beautiful men. They do. For us, it is actually, we like to see beautiful men too, because frankly, if we have a steamy sex sequences, I think we'd rather have somebody like Chris Evans taking care of business instead of Chris Evans. Oh dear God. So there you go. Now, this list isn't exactly a list of the sexiest men alive, although lots of these people are male versions of eye candy, but this is more of a celebration of the ability by these actors to make a character that is really sexy. I mean, you know, you need makeup, you need art department, you need hairstylists, you need especially costumes, and you know, all this kind of stuff. So today I'm gonna rank the 20 sexiest male movie characters of all time. Hit it! So the real rules are pretty simple. Only one actor can appear at one time, and it is a combination of hotness of you as an actor, your character's personality, and the design of the character. Simple as that. We will be taking a look at gods, thieves, musicians, cowboys, agents, magicians, vampires, ninjas, cops, gnome kings, cyborgs, businessmen, wizards, warriors, and more. Coming from such locations such as Australia, the United States, Spain, United Kingdom, South Korea, New Zealand, Canada, Denmark, ranging between the age of 27 and 44. So, here we go. Number 20, from the movie Body of Lies, Honey, Mark Strong. My man crush from 2007, oldest of our fellows with his 44 years. Honey was of course, the head of intelligence in Jordan. I actually believed he was Jordanian when I saw him. And it was just the fact that he was so elegant, and he had, you know, the body language was always this, I am really, you know, calm and collective, and he always, you know, had these very nice suits and the perfect 5 o'clock shade. He just looked so manly, and he just looked so good. I don't know, there's something very, you know, powerful about him, but also something a little bit soft and delicate. I don't know, maybe this is the thing that he said my dear all the time to Leonardo DiCaprio. Maybe that has something to do with it. From the movie Troy, Hector, Eric Bana. Newsflash, people, Achilles isn't in this one. I know, what a jerk. Yeah, but Brad Pitt may or may not show up in this one later. But for me, I always thought that the character of Hector was a bit more interesting than Achilles. Achilles was not that interesting character, and Brad Pitt was mostly looking very ripped in that one, and it was ridiculous. But for me, I always liked Hector more as a character, and Eric Bana had this, you know, vulnerability about him, and still he was a badass. And he could fight, and he just had this, you know, charisma about him. And Eric Bana has always been this sort of underrated sexy man, and for my money, you can never go higher with Eric Bana than what he did in this movie. Eric Bana is an underrated actor in all, I think, and, you know, sexiness was never higher than he was in this one. From the movie The Sting, Johnny Hooker, Robert Redford. Robert Redford's place on this list has a lot to do with both the makeup department and costumes, because he just looks so cool. And I mean, the suits he's wearing in this one, and his hats, and you know, the entire 1930s kind of thing just suits him so well. And he has always been a nice looking chap, the good Robert Redford, but he has never looked better than he does in this one. And he also has this you know, very likable character, which, you know, etches him up a couple of notches. And he just has this amazing personality about him, and yeah, it's difficult not to love him. And he just looks so damn good in that suit. Red really suits him. From the movie Doctor Strange, Benedict Cumberbatch. Ah yes, my man crush from 2016. Brain is also a sexy thing, because I mean, no one basically is smarter than Doctor Strange. I also like his arrogance, and I like the way that he, you know, but also he just looks so damn dignified. Doctor Strange doesn't need abs. He doesn't need, you know, a well-sculptured face, although he doesn't, you know, look bad or anything. But it is just the way he carries himself. It is the way that he, you know, approaches things, and his costume just makes him look royal, regal. I don't know what it is, but it is something that makes him so fascinating and just makes him look really, really good when he is fighting Dormammu with his words. Doctor Strange may not, you know, show up on, you know, people's list over their favorite Marvel characters or anything like that, but he's one of my favorites, and he just looks so damn impressive when he does his stuff. And smartness is sexy. From the movie Headhunters, Claes Greve, Nikolaj Coster-Waldau. Ooh, Kingslayer, my man crush from 2011. Before he was Jaime Lannister, he was Claes Greve in this Norwegian thriller, which is a very good movie. But I just sat there and thought to myself, who is this guy? He just had this, you know, power over him. And the way, you know, he smiled, his malevolent wolf smile. And you know from the start that this guy was bad news. He's a bad boy, this little fellow. Before he became famous for banging his sister in Game of Thrones, this was a guy, you know, who could carry a suit, and, you know, was and he just had gravitas about him. Now, Claes Greve is an awful character. He's a terrible person, but that doesn't mean he isn't eye candy for absolute days. He knows how to dress well, just like me, and also, damn, he just has this, I don't know what it is. It's difficult to explain why I just think he looks so damn sexy, but there is something about him that just screams out manliness and danger. From the movie Blade Runner 2049, K, Ryan Gosling. Now here is a thing. Ryan Gosling looks basically like hunkiness on two legs, but every time he shows up to make a movie, his character is pretty uninteresting and pretty dull. People would probably believe that I would have picked a movie like Gangster Squad for the good Gosling. But to me it is definitely the Blade Runner sequel that gets the nod. Why? Simple put, this is an absolute master casting, because here his uninvestment is matching the character, and he just looks so incredible with the, you know, the jackets and the, you know, him walking through the rain and all this stuff. It is a great look for him. This is Ryan Gosling at his absolute finest. From the movie Labyrinth, Jareth, David Bowie. In 1947, every single person born that Day was a dull and uninteresting person. Why? Because all the charisma had to be put into one man, David Bowie. I like David Bowie as a musician, not as much as I would like to, but his magnetism is shown in this movie. This is a really weird movie, but it is carried through and through by David Bowie's commitment to the entire thing. He showed up on set, they gave him this makeup, this hair, this outfit, and he pulled it off. Somehow he made that work. What is going on here? David Bowie may seem like a really odd duck in this collection of, you know, handsome dudes, but there's just something that is so fascinating about him. He made his Gnome King not only, you know, he made the Gnome King entirely his own. Nobody else could have pulled this one off but David Bowie. Nobody. It's impossible. Bowie is a master of this one. He may not have the traditionally good looks or sexiness that you would, you know, guess that the list of this would be populated by, but there's just something that is so fascinating about him, and the charisma that he brings is just off the wall. He's fun, he's threatening, he is enjoying himself, he's sad, he's happy, and he can also sing and dance and, you know, and throw babies around himself. It is crazy. And the Gnome King is a really cool dude. From the movie LA Confidential, Bud White, Russell Crowe. Today Russell Crowe looks more like a huggable teddy bear that doesn't give a shit about anything. But there was a time when he was a raging ball of masculinity and the suspenders and the punching people to death. And that was Bud White in the fantastic movie LA Confidential. He was probably one of the most memorable part of that movie. He was a cop who was honest and hated people who beat up women, and if they did so, he would beat the shit out of them a lot. The thing was, he was like a cruise missile dressed in 30s outfits, and he was just dangerous, and he was masculinity personified. Bud White, don't want to get on his bad side, but his bad side looks pretty good. From the movie Ninja Assassin, Raizo, Rain. Rain is actually part of a boy band from South Korea, and him starring in this movie was basically a joke from the Wachowskis, who thought that it would be fun to see if it was, you know, possible to put this handsome looking dude in a movie where he would butcher ninjas basically for 1.5 hours. And the best part is he looked very good while doing so. Whether or not it was you know, him practicing in his little, you know, apartment, throwing stars and having these stars, and he was throwing them around, and he also had abs for absolute days, a flawless face, and the ability of cutting people into small little bits. You don't really need that much more. Also, he looked good when he bled. You have to look good when you bleed if you're gonna pull off something sexy in this one. He may be also a little bit of an odd duck in this little segment, but I think that he was not very interesting as a character, but he just looked so good, and he was just a, you know, complete package. Raizo, he will slice you up and take your heart also. From the movie Courage Under Fire, Nat Serling, Denzel Washington. In the mid-1990s, Salt and Pepper released a song called What a Man, where they were, you know, bragging about how awesome their men were, and one of them described her men like a body like Arnold with Denzel's face. That's Denzel Washington they were describing. And in the mid-1990s, Denzel Washington was basically one of the sexiest men alive, and there was a running joke that whenever you saw a black dude in a fancy military uniform, you said, "Hey, there's Denzel Washington." No, wait, it's not. This is the original one. Now, Courage Under Fire is not a very good movie. It's most interesting because it features a very early role from Matt Damon. But now we're talking about Matt Serling here. And no one carries a uniform quite like Denzel Washington, especially not that it's as swag as this one. Denzel Washington is still to this day pretty good looking dude, although he has, he's way up in his 60s. But here he was 42 years old and on top of his game, and no one carries a nice looking uniform like Denzel. From the movie Dracula, Gary Oldman. This is a sexy vampire. This is not, this is. Not, is, not, is. Vampires can be mysterious. They can be, sexy, and they can have a sexual mystery to them. This is the original sexy vampire. Because despite not being a very tall dude, much shorter than most people on this list, and not being a person that most people think about when they're thinking about sexy people, Gary Oldman was in the beginning of the 90s a bit of a sex symbol actually. And it should be noted I'm talking about this Gary Oldman and not this Gary Oldman. There's two different characters basically. Because when he arrives to London, he just looks so sophisticated. He has this, the longing in his eyes after Winona Ryder, and the way he walks, the way he moves, he just has this magnetism about him. It's really a shame that nobody has been able to top this Dracula. This is the best Dracula that's ever been made. This is the best movie about Dracula that's ever been made. This is the best Dracula that's ever been played. Gary Oldman was able to craft a tragic character that also was cruel and evil, but you always felt a little bit sorry for him, and he just looked so good when he was, biting people left and right. From the movie The Prestige, Robert Agnew, Hugh Jackman. This may come as a shock. I did not pick Wolverine for Hugh Jackman. I mean, this is probably gonna shock some ladies, I guess. Because, Wolverine is the reason why Hugh Jackman basically became famous, because he was ripped and he was a cool character and he had his claws and stuff like that. But I prefer him clean shaven with Victorian age clothes on and having a grudge with Christian Bale. And everybody knows that he can sing, and he's a very, very talented man, and he has a really good look. But this is my favorite character that he has played. And also he has never looked better than in this one. From the movie A Fistful of Dollars, Joe, Clint Eastwood. Standing almost 1 meter 95 centimeters, this is a very, very tall and very, very handsome dude. When I grew up, we used to say that when I grow old, I want to look like Clint Eastwood. Because, the old Clint Eastwood that we saw in the late 90s, he basically looked like he was carved out of granite or something like that. He just looked tough as nails. And when you add youth and awesomeness to it, you get a guy basically who looks like he could, eat you up and spit you out. But at the same time, he just had this, sparkle in his eyes, and he was just the coolest guy ever. I definitely pick him over Dirty Harry, because Dirty Harry was not as interesting of a character. Joe is an interesting character, and he looks fantastic, and he is just a badass. And it is difficult not to get invested when Joe starts to shoot people and being awesome. The strength of Clint Eastwood was never his ability to have long monologues, stuff like that. It was his way of looking at you and intimidating you, and he was actually a bit of a sex symbol in the 1970s, but this is largely forgotten today. From the movie Escape from New York, Snake Plissken, Kurt Russell. I still remember when I saw it with my mom. She didn't see that long of the movie because she thought it was too violent, but when she saw Snake Plissken, she said, "Oh, that is a man. That is a really sexy man." This is a bit like in the same ballpark as Joe. Snake Plissken is an awesome dude. He has this fantastic iconic look, the long hair, the eye patch, the leather coat, the tattoos. He looks like a true bad boy, and he was a lean, mean fighting machine. And he didn't really need abs. He didn't really need the show off. He had a natural look about him, and he had a rugged charm to him. And Kurt Russell just was so good at playing him, and he just looked amazing. What can I say? I really dig Snake Plissken. He's an awesome character, and the ridiculous lines that he says, he actually pulls them off and makes them sound not only believable, but cool. From the movie Goldfinger, James Bond, Sean Connery. It was so close. It was so close that I actually was going to place Sean Connery's role as Richard Lionheart from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, making him the oldest guy in this merry band. But when I thought about it a little bit, then I realized I'll have to take James Bond. But I want to mention Richard Lionheart because nobody on earth has looked as kingly as Sean Connery does in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. He steals the entire movie. But now we're going to talk about James Bond. Now, James Bond in the 1960s would be a little bit tricky today to present as a character for the modern age, because he's a bit of a sexist and he slaps women around a little bit. But Jesus Christ, he has style, he has swag, he has the way with ladies. He drinks his vodka martinis and he says his silly catchphrases, and he just has this arrogance and this masculinity that just drops off him like sweat. He just oozes machismo, and of the people who has played James Bond, he beats them by a country mile when it comes to sexiness and masculinity. They don't even come close by. And yes, I know that Daniel Craig is a pretty sexy dude here also, but it's just impossible for Daniel to beat the OG James Bond, Sean Connery. And also nobody wears a tuxedo quite like him. From the movie Wild Wild West, Jim West, Will Smith. In the late 90s, Will Smith was reliable for two things: getting women into the theater and turning an entire audience into a water slide, and sell lots of tickets to dudes because he was very likable and could crack a joke or two. It wasn't difficult to pick out the single sexiest role for Mr. Smith. It was definitely Wild Wild West. The reason why is pretty simple. He gets to wear the most ravishing clothes and he gets to be a badass. I'm gonna try to forget that he dragged up once and played... What the hell was that, by the way? Now, having one of the most gorgeous faces in the history of time do help. And the fact that his character was a little bit rubbish and a little bit unpleasant at time, you have to take that with a pinch of salt, because you get to look at this wonderful face. From the movie Fight Club, Tyler Durden, Brad Pitt. Of course Brad Pitt was going to be on this list. He is one of the sexiest men alive. He has been voted that a lot of times. And the fact was, but the question was, which Brad Pitt? I've talked about that Brad Pitt from Troy wasn't gonna cut it. He was ripped, sure he looked amazing in that one, but his character was a little bit shit and he wasn't that interesting. A character that I thought about for a while was actually his character from Seven. Oh, what's in the box? What's in the fucking box? But despite having his nice goatee and suspenders and stuff like that, he still couldn't really crack it into the top. So in steps Tyler Durden. Tyler Durden from Fight Club is the friend you don't want to have but sort of wish that you wanted to have sometimes. He's an anarchist and he's an absolute badass and he's a crazy guy and he bleeds all over people and he has very nasty sex with Bellatrix Lestrange and also he has this way of dressing that is very interesting with his red leather jacket and his weird haircut, and just the fact that he also has abs for absolute days. He just looks good and he's crazy. This is my favorite performance from Brad Pitt, and he also happens to look his best while doing it. Good job, Brad. From the movie Desperados, El Mariachi, Antonio Banderas. The inferno that is the eyes of Antonio Banderas might burn you alive if you look at it too long, because damn. This is the first time that you're gonna going to hear the word Robert Rodriguez in this one. He is the director of this one and it will not be the last. If you're thinking about the hot-tempered Spanish guy, with fire in his heart and lust in his eyes, then you're thinking about Antonio Banderas. Antonio Banderas is basically the stereotypical Spanish guy in this case, but he just looks so good and he has so much fire in him and he shoots people and he has sex with Salma Hayek and he makes the art of shooting people look amazingly sexy, and he can play the guitar and he can dance and he can sing and he can do all this kind of stuff, and a multi-talented and multi-shooting character in El Mariachi makes him an absolute... the only thing that El Mariachi lacks as a character is probably the fact that he isn't that funny. He is just so obsessed with his vengeance and shooting people that if he would have been a little bit funnier, he probably would have climbed one place to second place, but he's not gonna do that and you will soon find out why. From the movie Ocean's 11, Danny Ocean, George Clooney. If you didn't think that George Clooney was going to be on this list, then you're fired. I don't care what job you have, you're fired. Now, Mr. Silver Fox was obviously going to be high on this list. I mean, he has one of the most gorgeous faces on the planet. He has all the charisma you would like, and he just has the most wonderful smile, and also being one of the most handsome men that has ever lived. But which George Clooney was he going to pick? Am I going to pick more of a seasoned George Clooney, or am I going to pick a more younger George Clooney? I aim for something slightly in the middle. I think that Danny Ocean is one of my favorite characters that he has played. He's just swag and he's suave and he is a bit like a James Bond character almost. He has all this self-confidence and he's cooler than ice, and damn, he just looks so damn good. From the movie Thor, Ragnarok. Thor, Chris Hemsworth. Hey, the Disney won again and the Avengers are on top. Who'd thought? When I devised this list, I always knew that I probably was going to have a superhero on top of things, because superheroes has, the coolest outfits and they are, over the top characters and they become quite interesting. But once I saw Thor Ragnarok, I knew I found him. I have found the perfect sexy superhero. It's Thor. Now, Thor was always, a very handsome and sexy guy. He had more abs than anybody else. Apart from Shah Rukh Khan, nobody has more abs than Thor. But And he had the look, he had the perfect outfit, and he had his hammer, and he had his long hair, and he just had everything that, you know, was sexy and cool and badass. But there was just one thing he lacked. He didn't really have that much of a personality. He took himself a little bit too serious, I think. Sure, he had a sparkle in his eyes, and you know, which probably made every woman on the planet's knees buckle a little bit, but there was still something lacking. And I didn't know what it was until I saw Thor Ragnarok. And then I knew it. This movie is basically 2 hours and 10 minutes of Thor expects everything to go according to plan. And he also turned himself into a little bit of a doofus. And when he turned himself into a little bit of a doofus, he became funny. When he made himself funny, he didn't remove anything of the sexiness and his gorgeousness. He just added another layer to the whole thing, and that was what made him squeeze past George Clooney to become the sexiest male movie characters of all time. No one really comes close to him. Thor is just the best. Just the best. Now you ladies have looked at enough eye candy for one time, I think. Now it is time for the lads. In a couple of days I will release the second list. The 20 sexiest female movie characters of all time. Till next time, this is Wikstrand signing out.